And
see, there you are. I caught somebody dancing.
sudden stop.
See,
Sudden stop. I like
that's
it.
awesome. See, all those times Josh said he was kicking us out. He wasn't really kicking us out. He was just pressing the button that starts the music, and that must
think so. And
automatically block us
I think
out.
he when nobody can see it, he just gets up and kind of shakes it in front of the camera.
I'm pretty sure he does. That's why he has so much space in his office. I mean,
I think that's it.
Really,
that's it.
Which brings us to a good topic here. Why exactly is Josh not here? We don't really know. It's a mystery. He's called off way on
something about the inmate
mission
running the asylum or something.
Yeah,
I'm not sure what it was.
He's on a super secret keystroke medium mission behind.
And we weren't invited?
Enemy Alliance, right?
What is this?
We're like this. We're like backup team or something. He's like the A team. We're the B team.
Again.
We're the guys in the van.
So welcome everybody to Keystroke Medium. We're running the show a little bit differently today. We're Joshless. It's a horrible medical condition when you don't have a Josh. But so we're going to talk today about revision, not so much revision, but what you do after you finish your book. So we're going to take, you just finished your novel and kind of where to go from there. So, you guys ready to get started?
Yeah, I think so. Got my water.
Sure, man. What you been up to this week, Scottster?
This week, let's see. I'd start writing a couple of projects. I kicked back and doing a post-apocalypse story for Devin that I've been starting on several times. I really enjoy. It's just a lot of fun. Wrapping up, I'm about 43,000 words into Bastion of the Reaper, which is the last book. It's very interesting to write the final book in a 10-book series, having never done that before. So that's interesting. Kids are going crazy around the house, and that's about it. The weather is, of course, on and off again around here, but that's about it. Not too much exciting stuff.
What's going on?
Well, I just got back from a writers' conference in Colorado.
Oh boy.
Colorado, the Super
right.
Conference. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Put on by Kevin J. Anderson, and there was Jonathan Mayberry there, Eric Flint, Jim Butcher was there giving a presentation.
With blue hair, as I recall.
With blue hair, bright blue.
He's a wizard, Harry.
Totally rocking it. And he was not just rocking it, he had copies of peace talks on flash drive that the very special people at his VIP dinner got to have. I was not at that VIP dinner, but I know, but I was in the same room and I was enjoying the presence of the marvelous Dan Wells. He's a friend of Brandon Sanderson, and he also runs the Writing Excuses podcast. Fantastic guy, lots of great information to offer, very kind person, just wants to help. Excellent podcast, and I got to kind of ask him his wisdom for the night.
That's awesome.
Cool beans.
It was cool watching all that, all of your social media.
Yeah, I like the post, and I wish that's one I wish I could have gone to, because Mulberry, Butch, those are some of my go-to favorites right there.
Yeah, I was taking notes the whole time, just scribbling.
I bet.
And I wanted to share it with you guys, and I missed you, and I was wishing you guys were there. So I was like, I'll just post. I'll tweet this when everyone gets tired of my Facebook posts. So I just kind of flip back and forth between Facebook and Twitter to get all of my favorite little tidbits out there onto the net somewhere.
We'd never get tired of a good conference.
No.
Yeah. Ken says Jim Blucher.
Blucher?
We're talking about the blue hair. Jim Butcher. I don't know. I'm reading the live chat. They're up to the shenanigans as normal. So good conference?
Yeah, excellent conference. And by the time it was over, all I wanted to do was get home and write. Just write. And that was one takeaway. Conference was great. And if you're looking for a place where you can meet other authors who are passionate about writing and who want to talk craft, someone else that can nerd out about craft with you, then a conference is a great place to go. Superstars is one such place. There are many other fantastic conferences out there. But by the end of it, all I wanted to do was not talk about writing, but just do actual writing. So if you were here at home, not at a conference and writing, hats off to you. Keep doing it. Go for it.
Perfect. about you, Chuck? What did you got going on this week?
Still plugging away at Dark Devices, and yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, I've got all my outlines ready to go for the next projects after that. I just the family stuff keeping me busy, and so I'm writing, like, I'll sit in the car while I'm in line to pick up my daughter with my laptop, just trying to get his words in where I can and stuff. So
that's the way to do it.
Plugging away, man, just a little bit at a time. I still think I can have that one done into this month, very early March. So, and I think Steve and them won't disown me for taking so damn long.
They're probably going to drive up there and give you a code red or something. Camera's going crazy, keeps going on and off.
Going nuts.
Sounds like you need a laptop.
But Chuck, they just want the best manuscript you can do, no matter. I was going to say no matter how long it takes. That's probably not true.
Nah.
Do not say that. But they want your best, and maybe if it takes a little longer.
Yeah, they've been super cool. Because I moved last year and all that other stuff, and it just slowed everything down, and so they've been super understanding about it. They're good guys over there.
Yep.
But anyway, what am I going to do with that manuscript once I type the?
That's a pretty good question. I'm glad you asked.
Yeah. What do you like to do? Like, are you one of those, like, a lot of the popular wisdom is that once you type the end, you stick it in a drawer for a couple of weeks or whatever and just walk away. Are you one of those, Scott, or you try to keep the process going? I
like that. That's been my preferred method for most of my writing career, as it were. Lately, I don't do that so much because normally I'm on a pretty tight deadline. So I also find value in immediately turning around while it's still fresh in your mind and starting from the beginning and just working through it. So, I mean, I like both ways. What about you?
I tend to, the very first thing I do when I finish any manuscript, and I've always done this, is I'll close out whatever I'm working on. Back in the day when I was typing everything, I'd take that last page and stick it in the little file thing that I stuck my pages in. And then I just get up and I walk away from the desk and I go do something to celebrate, have a glass of scotch, whatever time frame I was in would depend on what I did to celebrate. Because I think finishing any first draft, I don't care if it's your first or your 50th, that's a moment that deserves to be recognized, because that's a lot of work, and you need to take a minute and appreciate the fact that you accomplished that. Usually for me, I won't go back to it on that day. I'll just leave it alone and I'll do my best to forget about it. I'll start thinking about the next book. I'll start, if I haven't already made notes and started pre-work for that, I might start that day. So it'll go a day or two before I get back to it. And and then that's kind of.
Do you write something else in the meantime, or just take?
I'll do. It just depends on how anxious I am to get to that next thing. If I'm immediately jumping into the same series, I'll tend to get started a little sooner than if I'm starting something brand new. Because if I'm starting something brand new, I want to take a little bit to get my head out of that one series and really let it kind of gel with the new thing that's coming up, and I'll do the pre-work for that. But if I'm immediately going into the same series, I'll take my little celebratory afternoon or whatever, but then I'll typically jump back into that pretty quick since it's fresh in my mind and all.
What's kind of the danger of celebrating too much and then the next day you take off, and then the day after that you take off?
Yeah, well, that's just that just comes back to the discipline. It's just, if you're going to do it, you got to do it, right? But I'm one of those people, if I go, I have to write something pretty much every day, or my wife tells me I get grumpy.
That happens in our household as well too.
Yeah, she says I'm grumpalicious is what she calls me.
That doesn't sound like a bad thing though. I mean, so far we've established step 1, celebrate. And then there's 4 different. So finish your book. The first thing you should do is celebrate it in some small way. And then we're debating back and forth between whether or not that means put it aside or just dive right back in.
And then step 2 is take your draft and send it straight to Ellen Campbell. Send it straight.
No.
Right.
whoever your editor is, first draft.
There's a caveat to that. You have to make sure you send it in courier, single space, because
With no return address, otherwise she will hunt you down and cut you.
right, yeah, and then leave the country.
Yeah, that's yeah. I don't know that Ellen would appreciate immediately getting that first draft.
No,
Because I think because let's face it, as writers, I mean, I'm not an editor by any stretch of the imagination. I don't claim to be, but I mean, I can run a spell check. You know, if I find obvious freaking typos in the manuscript, I'm going to correct those before I send them to an editor. You know, because to me, that's almost like an insult to their intelligence to send them, or my intelligence, I guess it would be. You know, it's like, yeah, I'm going to send you this thing where I obviously futzed up the words terribly just because my fingers don't work right.
and it's unprofessional, you know. And
You want to clean it up a little bit.
You want them to give their best effort, so they, you know, you got to send them your best. So
right, and if they're spending all their time catching all this obvious stuff, you know, if I say I send it to Ellen or Lauren or somebody, and they're like, "Oh, God, it's misspelled this, did that," they might miss the deeper problems.
Right.
You know, if they're distracted by all this stuff that I could have done myself. So I'll run it through a spell check, and I'll kind of read it out loud to myself, just kind of go through it, just not for any kind of deep edit, but just to catch the really obvious speed bumps.
Right.
And then once I've done that, I start thinking about sending it to a professional, as it were.
I recently sent one of my books into our variant. Oh, did Chuck just fall off?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt, Chuck. You have to leave. Okay. No, but I sent it to our editor for the Reaper series, and she sent me a little note. She said, "I'm always happy when I figure out one of your voice dictation ones that slip through, because they like make no sense. It'll be like in code, and you figure out what it said." So, for example, one of the characters in that book is Elise. Her name's Elise. Well, in voice dictation, usually it comes out as "at least." And so there'll be this weird random "at least" in the middle of sentences that make no sense. But I like Chuck's thing about giving it a good proofread. Everybody knows I use my various speech to text or text to speech programs to read back to it. I think those are important. I mean, those really help me. And I kind of do this as I'm going along. I do want to get to Nathan's question at some point during this, if we can try to remember about. He says that he's having problems working on sequels. So he can pump out first books, but writing number 2s are hard to get moving. It says, any advice on writing a second novel in series? So I think Chuck's messaging me. Let's see if we can get him back in there. Oh, he's rebooting. Roger Dodger.
Well, I guess with Nathan, before I start a series, I'd want to know where the series as a whole is going. What's that end game? I'd want to know that before I start book 1. I might not know all the steps to getting to that end point, but I'd want to have a pretty strong idea. Jim Butcher, he talked about this at the writers' conference.
Yeah.
He has a 20-book series with the Harry Dresden Files, and before he started it, he asked a story question about the plot of each book. And the story question would be asking about what the main conflict of that story is, of that particular book. And he wrote out just a couple sentences to summarize what that book was about. So books 1 through 20, he knew what the main conflict and how that conflict gets resolved in each of the books is. So he had that overall arching plot, and he had the main idea behind the plot of each book in that series. That, for me, would make me feel more confident as a writer kind of going into it. So my suggestion would be to know where the series is going as a whole, and then to figure out what steps will get you there and what that means for each book, including the second book in the series. But I say that as someone who has not written a series before, and Scott, you have. So what do you think?
I think that's a great idea. So what Jeff Chaney and I do when we're writing the last Reaper series is we do arcs, and that's kind of what he did in his other series. But so he told me, he said, let's do a 5 or 6 book arc. And so we came up with the main story idea. And the main story idea of that one was basically some things happened to the main character, Halleck Kane. and he's got to figure out why these things happened and how to correct them and get vengeance or whatever. There's several different nuances I don't want to talk about in too much detail because that'd be boring. But so that arc wound up taking 5 books to get that objective. So each book is standalone, but I knew that by the end of this, there's going to be a showdown over kind of the grand villain of the arc. And so like book 1 is introduction to the character in the first mission. And then book 2, they're obviously, since it's space opera, one of the characteristics of space opera is that you travel around in a ship. You know, it's not just in one science fiction place. There's usually some travel involved. And so in step 2, they have to leave because where they're at the end of book 1 basically is destroyed. So they have to leave. So I know they have to go someplace. So it gets me started on the second book. It's not a cliffhanger, but it pushes into book 2 because they have to get the ship fixed and ready to go. They have to find a crew. They have to go to this next objective and figure out what their mission is and accomplish it. So that, like you said, having that, so I kind of had that little 1 paragraph blurb over what needed to happen in that one. And basically it was something like Kane builds his crew and gets a better ship and goes and it sounds basically the deal is he has to find something to do with Elise, which is the character that he saves in book 1, and he wants to unload her. So he dumps her on this planet with some people that thinks will take care of her, but then he figures out that now she's in danger. So he's basically got to go back. They got to team up, and he's not really saving her because that sounds kind of what do you call it, a trope. But they basically going to team up. They're going to establish that they are now the team that's going to go through the rest of the series. So that's the main way.
Now, let's go back to Nathan's question. Let's say you haven't plotted the end yet. You don't know what the end yet is. So you can't plot backwards. You just have the book 1. Where can you come up with an idea for book 2?
So what I would do with that is, one, I would take a step back and take an honest assessment of book 1 and how it turned out. If you don't really have huge plans for book 2, and what you find out is what worked in book 1. Like, what were the characters that people liked the most? If you're getting reader feedback, which is very good, or just what are the characters you liked the most that you found the easiest to write, that had the most momentum? And you might find out, like I always ask that question of our interview guests, what's your favorite side character? I don't know why my lighting is doing this. I'm sorry, but I ask people what their favorite side character is because I believe that usually you start writing a book, you plot it out, you plan it out, but during that, you sometimes find that you have another character that's at least as powerful as the main protagonist, and you like them better. They have a more powerful story. They're more interesting. And so when you get book 1 done, it might be a good time to go, you know what? Do I need more or less of this side character for this series? In book 2, maybe book 2 is about the side character. Or maybe I need to kill that character off because they're too distracting from my overall story arc that I've done. I've had to do that with several characters in the Reaper series, where I had to basically give them a job that took them away from the main action because I was going to have like 50 main characters if I wasn't careful. So that would be my main thing, is assess what's working in book 1 and figure out how to do more of it in book 2.
And you're saying a lot of that could be characters that people fall in love with and they see more of in the next book.
Right.
It could also be action points. So things in your conflict that people found exciting. But then how can you push that conflict to the next level in the next book? One way is you could change the setting, right? Yes. What did they love about the setting in your book 1? How can I do that, but more and different in book 2? Where can I take my characters next? Yeah.
And then do something to your characters like they don't expect. Like, say you get your initial idea, like they're going to go to this planet. Well, then maybe initially you thought this is going to be a desert planet. Then you decide, okay, let's do that same story, but as a jungle planet. And that will change everything about the dynamics because there's a big difference in how you traverse those two types of things. So kind of subvert your own expectations when you're building the story idea. Or there's a book, and I need to hold on. I have it. It's I think it's Stein on writing, Soul Stein. I have it over here on my bookshelf, but he talks a lot about off the top of the head, like you have a story. You and I talked about a story plot idea where we had the shaped nuclear charges, right?
Yeah.
For one of your books you're writing, and And so when you first think, well, I need this to happen, and you think, well, there'll be an explosion. And so then that's your first idea, but then you don't take that idea, you develop a second idea. Okay, well, what would make this more complicated, or what would make this more unique, or both? So I guess come up with some ideas for book 2, but then don't take those ideas, change them.
Yeah. Sean Coyne in the Story Grid, he was saying that you come up with one idea for your plot for the next scene, possible plot twist, a possible plot complication. Well, don't just come up with one idea. Keep pushing yourself to come up with 5, come up with 10, come up with 15. Maybe by the time you get to the 15th, that you'll come up with something very different. For me, I'm like, whoa, I wish I could just get 3.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And it's dangerous too. If you come up with 3, you might wind up with 3 different books getting written, if you're not too careful. You're like, I need space cowboys in this. Well, that doesn't fit here. I guess I'll write a new book. But no, I think that's a great idea because it gives you more flexibility. And then sometimes I think you can do things like make the bad guy the good guy in this scene, make the good guy the bad guy in this scene, and do some of those things, which will make it so that it's not just plodding along through your action beats, like sometimes stories can get to be if you're not careful.
All right. So what I'm hearing is that you finish your draft. One option you can do is to start the next book. You could start plotting your next book, but keep the creative spark fed, as it were. Keep going.
Right. So I guess what we're talking about is like the subject of this show is to what you do when you finish your first draft. And I think one important thing is if you have a lot of energy, here comes Chuck. You back? There we go. Papa Chuck, can you hear us?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Good.
Sorry about that, guys.
No problem.
I don't know if it'll happen again. Apparently, StreamYard kicked me out because it can't connect to my camera. So I don't know what happened there.
It's like you have to have a camera. We won't accept your emoji. Your dumpster fire emoji is not StreamYard compatible.
Apparently not. It's offensive to someone.
Yeah. So what we're talking about, we're just kind of moving right along. We basically said nothing since you left. We've just been filling time. But what we got back around to is that if you finish your book and you have like you're really inspired to work on the second book, then take a couple of days and just and work on that. Might be a good idea. I like to kind of go the other way from what you suggested, Chuck. Is I usually start immediately, but at the same time, I also by the time I get to the book, my process, I have to go back and read from the beginning a lot, so that I understand what the ending is going to be. So I kind of start my revision before I'm actually done with the book. That makes sense.
No, I get that. Yeah.
Yeah. So by the time I'm revising the last 10%, I've been through the first 90% numerous times, either with different. For a while, I was using Pro Writing Aid to help me go through some editing stuff, to like look for repeated words, awkward phrasings. I'll do the technique where you have your phone or whatever device read it back to you, or you can have a friend. Actually, when I first started doing this, it's because my mom was always supportive of my writing, and so sometimes when I finished a book, we would, if she was in town or we happened to be in the same town, then she would read chapters of it to it, and I would sit there and listen, and so she would pick up mistakes I would miss reading it myself because in my head those mistakes are correct. You know what I mean? So you have a friend, get a good friend to read your book to you. They'll thank you for it later.
What if you're reading your book and you think the plot is just not strong, or the characters or the conflict is just not strong, and you're not sure which chapter needs revision? Maybe you're just like,
so like if you finished it and you've put it aside and you go back to it and you find some big developmental type problem, what do you do?
Yeah, where do you start to untangle that, or to find the problem spots and revise just that scene without rewriting? You don't want to rewrite the whole thing, right? You really want to with the problem and fix just those. How do you do?
Be careful. First of all, I think Chuck's probably got a good way to handle this, but before you need to also remember that you're not objective. And so there's been probably, almost every one of the Reaper books, I was like, this is the worst one. This is the one that everybody hates and the franchise dies. And And book 9, actually, I thought it's the 9th book. How good can the 9th book be? And I was really worried about it. I was just not feeling it, but I just kept writing the book because I had a deadline. And then I would go back, and some parts of it I liked, but overall I was like, I think I'm stretched too thin. I don't think I did a good job. I'm really scared this is going to be the one that just really craps a bed. And it turned out so far, it's been the favorite one in the whole series for most of my beta readers. So you're not objective. So first of all, keep that in mind before you jump all over yourself.
Yeah, that's a really valid point because, like, as I'm fond of saying, I've been doing this for, 30, 40 years now, and I still think everything I write is utter crap. Right up until the moment my wife reads it, because she's always my first beta reader. And then, and if it's crap, she'll tell me. I mean, she has no problem hurting my feelings on a very deep level if she feels like it's warranted.
Go back to your
pretty much. But so you have to take that into account. Now, if you legitimately find a place where it's like, oh God, I started this whole subplot here and it never did anything. I mean, it kind of depends on what the problem that you found is. You know what I mean? So what I typically try to do is go whatever like part of the book it is, if it's part of the main plot, if it's part of this, if it's a subplot, whatever, I go back to where that thing started. The very first, and I try to just sort of skip, I ignore everything else unless it, directly impacts it. And I just try to just sort of jump from scene to scene for that one thing and try to look at that as a whole without the context of the rest of the story. And I find that if you can make that work, it's a lot easier. It's a lot easier to have a plot over here that works and a plot over here that works and make those two work together than it is to have something that works and something that's broken go together. Does that make any sense?
Yeah. Sometimes I've had it several times where I finally realized that it needed to just be cut or complete. Or
right.
like,
and sometimes that's the case.
Or sometimes you just got to write that scene over. Sometimes you got to take that, save that to a different file and just rewrite that chapter and that'll fix it. But a lot of times, yeah, it's like I said, first you got to find the problem and then start at the beginning. I like to read the whole book from the beginning, so I get kind of a gestalt view of the whole thing.
Yeah.
And sometimes, like what Chuck was saying, if you wait a little bit and let it clear out, because usually, like, I'll get really critical of my writing, but if I look at something, like I went back and looked at my Enemy of Man book because I was going to do a podcast where I was going to have to read part of it. I'm like, and I am very self-conscious about that because it's one of the first books I published, and I actually really enjoyed it. So a lot of times, everybody, I think most, I don't know, have you guys had that where you go back and read something you wrote like 5 years ago and you're like, this is actually good?
I've actually, when I started doing audiobooks, I listened to all of them again. And I had that experience with Master of Hounds because I wrote it and everything. And it's like, I wrote it because I just wanted to write something set in my hometown, right? It was kind of it was more of a personal thing than anything. But then I went back and then I listened to the audio. I'm like, wow, this is actually a pretty good little adventure book, So yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about there.
Yeah, that objectivity thing.
Guy Anthony DeMarco says, start where you notice it.
Yeah.
Start where the problem begins and try to focus on that one scene. Ken Bretz, he says, if Ellen goes, what is this garbage? Probably just best to delete it. Yeah. It's kind of funny what like taking out can do to your book.
Oh, it can be very liberating. If you can learn to do it, it can be very liberating.
You have to cut mercilessly.
I've told a story before about my friend who has a master's in fine arts in ceramics. And when he was getting his, I think it was when he was getting his master's, one of his instructors, they made this the first day or whatever, a week, they made this big vase. And then as soon as they were done with it and they fired it in the kiln and they got it out and everybody stands around and looks at things, and they handed him a hammer and says, just smash it.
Yep.
And that was the assignment, smash it. And the point is that you got to be willing to do that. Sometimes you got to start over. You got to trash it, and
you can't be too precious about your oh so wonderful golden words. You gotta.
They're going to keep coming, because if they didn't keep coming, you probably would have quit a long time ago. But
exactly,
you can try to stop writing, but you're going to want to write something again sooner or later, in my opinion.
I mean, if that's what you do, that's what you do. That's the way it works, I think. Is it time for a show sponsor?
I think it is exactly 8:30 on my clock. So I don't know. Maybe we should wait a little bit and then kind of delay and do it at the last minute, or we could just do it right now.
Whatever you. I mean, you're the senior partner here, so I'm just
I think
defer to your judgment.
I'm pretty sure it's a Papa Chuck.
Is it a Papa Chuck
ad read? Papa Chuck ad reads.
Tonight's show sponsor is the nonfiction book "Great Stories Don't Write Themselves" by Larry Brooks. And I will now read the description to you. Story is the exploration of something that has gone wrong, and a lot has to go right during the telling of that story to render it a success. Yet one of the most common questions new writers ask professional writers is about how the author wrote their book, what was their process for storytelling, and from this we get plotters and pantsers. But really the question should be about the general principles and nature of story. Does every part of a story have what it needs to keep readers turning the pages, regardless of how the author got there? Does every scene, every part of the story support the strategic narrative objective of providing new information a scene will inject in the story, the key principle of writing fiction? In Great Stories Don't Write Themselves, Larry Brooks has developed a series of detailed checklists backed by tutorial content for novelists of every level and genre to refer to as they write, regardless of which writing method they prefer. Beginning with the broadcast part of story, the early checklists help writers to ensure that their book is based on a premise, aka plot, rather than an idea, or how you can elevate your idea into an actual premise where other story elements can be developed. Great Stories Don't Write Themselves gradually hones in on other story elements like hero empathy, dramatic tension, thematic richness, vicariousness of story, narrative strategy, scene construction, etc., each with their own checklist with specific actionable items that ensure the key principle, providing information to move the story forward, occurs. So go to Amazon and check out Great Stories Don't Write Themselves by Mr. Larry Brooks and see if it can help improve your writing today.
Ooh.
Or suffer the doom.
Or doom.
I just finished this book on the airplane back from Superstars. I really enjoyed it. It was like taking a writer's course on plot and story.
And isn't he coming on Writer's Journey Thursday?
He is. Yeah, we had him on back in maybe October to talk about this book when it first came out. But since we're doing a series on editing, I thought, hey, let's ask, see if he's available. Maybe he can come and talk to us about how to revise your plot. Actually, hopefully before you start writing your manuscript. How can you work out your plot and work out those kinks before you spend hours and hours and hours writing that first draft, which for me, that takes months, if not years, to get done. So
takes a lifetime. I'm a huge fan of the story engineering and story physics, I think is the other one. Book. Story engineering and story physics. So I'll definitely going to pick that one up too, because I always like another writing book. Good stuff. So where were we?
So fixing the things you stumble. Now all of this is still pre-editor, right?
Yeah, this is before you send
all
the
the stuff that we writers do prior to sending it to the people that really make it shine.
Oh, and I did have a question.
Go.
Have you guys used a writers group before? A lot of the writers at the conference were talking about this, that they'll get in a group with other buddy authors, or maybe even one or two authors and then other readers who are just interested in reading and giving feedback. So maybe a group of like 5 people, and 2 or 3 of them are authors and the other 3 or so are just readers, and then swapping manuscripts and giving each other feedback. Have you ever done that?
I have been in probably about a dozen or baker's dozen of those over the years.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I've ever been in one where there were just readers. I think everyone I've ever been in was strictly writers, and it's the smallest one was about 5 or 6 people. The largest one, I think we had 14 or 15, something like that. That's one I was in California. The value of those is going to depend very, very strongly on the personalities and skill levels of the people involved. If you're in a group with people who just want to sit around and talk about writing and not actually do any writing, you're the one, maybe you and one of the guys show up with actual pages for people, it's not a good fit. If you're in a group with people that don't take criticism well, that's always, I had a lady go off on me for criticizing her writing one time. That was right here in town. Actually, when I first came back to Huntsville, I was a part of one for a while. So I have found they can have value if you get a good group.
Yeah, if you find
kind of hit or miss. If you find a good group of writers who genuinely want to help each other, man, hang on to that like it's gold.
That is gold.
That's rare.
Yeah.
So is it possible to find another author, one or two other authors, perhaps internet, perhaps in some community on Facebook?
I don't know. Maybe if you went and you search for Keystroke Medium, you might be able to find a bunch of people that are interested in writing.
Readers, writers, and everyone in between. I don't know. Authors might collect twice a week and just listen, talk about the craft of writing.
Yeah, why do you think I've hung out with these guys as long as I have? I mean, come on. But and absolutely. I've never actually been, I don't really count this as a writer's group because we're not trading pages, but I've never actually tried it online before. I've always, I'm old. I do everything face to face.
Yeah.
Old school.
Face to face adds an element that online cannot.
Oh yeah, absolutely. There's just, there's nuances to conversation you don't get via chat or email.
All right.
What about you? You guys ever been in one?
Oh, kind of. Kayleen, she reads my manuscript as I go, and she gives me feedback. And if I get stuck in a plot, I'll call her, and she's talked to me for 2 hours, I think even 3 hours one time, and we just talked through the plot situation. She gave me ideas. Even if I didn't go with the idea that she said, it gave me another idea that I really loved and I got excited about and could write out that scene.
Right.
Just having that sounding board was extremely helpful for me.
Yeah.
I think it brings up a good point too, because one of the problems you have with writers groups, if they're too big, so you can't expect somebody to put that much time into your project if you can't reciprocate.
Right.
And so if you have 14 people, that means you got to read 14 other people's manuscripts. And you just can't do it. So, but if you find 2 or 3 people that you work well with and that also have something that you need, like Josh is really good at breaking down stories and structure and stories like that. Sometimes I can be good at turning a phrase or making up some random jokes, basically is the only thing I really do. But you find it where you complement each other and you can see Ralph, he is really good with writing a blurb for a book. And Joshua James is the same way. Several other people that I've met through here, and I'll write a blurb I think is brilliant, and then I'll give it to them and they'll send it back 10 times better. So they have strengths that I don't have, and we go back and forth.
Yeah.
So I think finding a small group that you can give as much as you get is going to be important, or else it won't last.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about those larger groups, because we as I recall with that one, we reached a point where it was like, look, everybody just bring 2 pages.
Right.
Because if you've got 14 other manuscripts, that's, and got day jobs and stuff, and the problem with that is there's no way to get any context with just a couple of pages,
And do you bring your worst stuff or your best stuff to be
right? Exactly.
There was one, I think that guy is talking about it in the chat. It's an online critique group, and I tried it. I can't remember what it's called.
Check out critters.org.
There was another. I haven't used that one, but there's one I tried for a while. But basically, the thing was you had to not beta read. What do they call it? Proofread, whatever. Do a critique of so many manuscripts before you could get yours, and there's usually short story length. So after you'd done enough, then you kind of had credits, and then people would start doing yours too. And it didn't work for me, but it was an interesting concept. You can.
My camera's not working, Corvo. So since everything's burning down around me over here,
A dumpster fire is Chuck's spirit animal.
That's pretty much. Yeah, pretty much. That is my internal life right there.
The other thing you can do, and it's not always going to work, but like you can also trade services, like because there's people that do professional proofreading. You know, maybe if you know how to design a website, or you do a developmental edit for them, and they do proofreading for you, or they do a book cover. You know, you can exchange some things like that. And if you're in the market for it, I think that it's not. I mean, I think it's worth the money to pay proofreaders if you find a good one. If you find, I've had a couple, and it depends on where you catch them in their proofreading career. So like when people are just starting out and they've kind of realized they got a knack for it, then maybe they don't got the chops to be a true editor as far as, you know, the grammar and stylistic and stuff, but they can read stuff and tell you what they think doesn't work for them, catch typos, you know, give you some feedback, you know. And I wasn't always able to afford it, but I've paid a proofreader $50, $100 or something like that. One of my editors, BZ Hercules, Beth, she has a proofreading service, and I will oftentimes at the last minute, and I've recommended her to several other people because she's fast, and they'll pay her like a professional fee to proofread something in like one day because it's got to go be uploaded the next day. But so I think that is an option you can explore. I know it's not always practical, but I think sometimes you get better paying for a professional proofreader because you're going to get somebody, because they're getting. So if you want a free proofreader, then you have to proofread for them. Now you have to spend 2 weeks proofreading their book. And for me, it's more cost effective for me to pay somebody $50 or $100 so I can have my 2 weeks to write.
Right. And I think proofreading is a definite level of editing. I mean,
it is.
That's a very
if they're good.
Important. Yeah.
Just to be clear on our terms, proofreading means the book's already been edited.
I've used it both ways, but I think technically you are correct.
I think line edit is
a proofreading means you have the proof copy in front of you.
Right. That's correct.
The manuscript is finished and now it's ready to go to the publisher. You've got the proof copy, so you're paying someone to read through it and to pick any final little errors.
Yeah, it's the fine polish.
Yeah. So it's been done. If you're paying someone to copy edit your book, if you need a copy edit or a line edit, you're paying someone you're hiring a proofreader, but what you really need is a line or copy edit, then you're either not fair to their time or you can't expect a good.
I see the distinction there. Yeah.
Because if you're paying somebody that's an editor, then you need to pay them, their services are extremely valuable. I mean, I can't overestimate how much better, like for example, on the short stories that Ellen did, she edited those, and that was amazing. And you've edited several for me, Lauren, too, short stories and things. And an editor needs to be paid. There's when indie writing first started, people were like, "Well, my mom teaches English, so I had my mom read it," and I actually did do that because my mom had a doctorate, and that's what I could afford at the time. But you really need to move as quickly as possible to a professional paid editor. And so for proofreaders, I'm talking that in the way I'm using the term pretty loosely, to replace finding a critique group where you have to dedicate weeks and months of your time, when you might get somebody just read it, give you a quick feedback on it, and maybe, somebody on a fixed income or somebody that $50 is worth their time because they're going to read it anyway because they like to read, but they could use $50. So I mean, I've done that a few times, more than a few times, and I've done it before and after because sometimes I want to send something extra cleaner to the editor.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and like with Cheney, we have multiple rounds of editing that they go through, and it's quite a process, but that's a whole other story. Dr. Moon. Yeah. My mom, I'll tell you a funny non-writing related story about my mom. So I really love my mom, obviously, but she has an EDS in education, which is the same as a doctorate. And I grew up calling her office because she was a principal or assistant principal, whatever, depending on when it was. And I would call up and I'd say, hey, is Virginia Moon there? Because I felt rude for me to say, hey, is my mom there when I was growing up. And so then she moved and got a new job. And one day I called up there and I said, and I'm like 30 years old at the time or something. And I called up and said, hey, is Virginia Moon there? And the secretary, because I guess my point is that her staff was very loyal to her. They really liked her because I said, is Virginia Moon there? And they said, Dr. Moon is busy. I said, this is her son. They go, oh, we'll get her for you. So, that just cracked me up. And it made me so happy inside that she had these people around her that were like taking care of her and protecting her from all these hooligans that wouldn't call her back.
Weirdos, call
right?
people.
Anyway, that's I don't know. I like that story, but you guys may not.
Oh.
So what are we doing?
So what are some other? Oh,
Bill Frisbee has a question. He asks, how and where do you find a $50 reader, and what do they help you with?
So for me, I can answer that. I've stumbled onto this because I had people that did it for free, and they started saying, hey, they said, I really like this. I would like to start doing this for money. And I said, okay, well, I'll pay this much to do something. And then I found they would go read for other people as well. So they were doing it for free because they liked it as like an advanced reader group. And then they said, yeah, they would appreciate some money. And I said, that works for me. And the thing is, when you pay somebody, you can set terms. You can say, yes, I will pay you $50, but it has to be done by Friday. But if you give it to your cousin to read 6 months later, you published a book 4 months ago and they're still not done proofreading it. That's what usually happens to me with unpaid proofreaders.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the other thing I'd say about that is to give them something specific, like really clear and specific direction on what to look for. So, for example, with my Western romance manuscript, not published, I could hire someone to focus on the guys' voices, read the script and help me to like make the guys sound more like guys and less like Lauren Moore, right? Less like me. That would be helpful. Or I might say my action scenes feel a little bit lame. I don't know. Can you give me pointers on how to make it more exciting and how to feel like you're in the middle of an actual gunfight?
That almost sounds like you're getting into story doctoring at that point, though.
Well, like if I were to give one person clear direction on man's voices or action scenes, just one of those two. I'm not saying, or if it is proofreading, something specific regarding proofreading. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah, and I'm sorry if I took us way off into the weeds with that too, because I do want to clarify that a professional editor, you cannot get around that. You should never try to not use an editor, and it should probably be one of the biggest production expenses of your book, in my opinion.
But we have to be real. Like that's not in everyone's budget.
Right.
But because I've paid between $600 and $1,500 for an editor. It just depends. It's not like, but I don't know. I like I said, it depends on what you can afford. But everybody here knows what I'm talking about. You do what you can, but it should definitely be on your radar to get the best editing you can get.
Sure.
If you happen to have somebody like Ellen or Lauren or somebody who just wants to give you a break because they think you're swell, then that'd be great. So some comments in there that think 1,500 is amazing, but like if you go to traditional publishing, they usually use 3 or 4 editors, and those editors sometimes get paid 5 figures and up.
Yeah.
I guarantee you that Stephen King's editor probably gets paid $50,000 a book.
Yeah. On
and we'll still have typos.
Editorial Freelancers Association, the rates from 2012 were 4 to 6 cents a word. That's 4 to 6 cents a word.
I'm gonna have to get my calculator. I can't do
that. Adds up fast.
That adds up fast. Yes. Exactly.
Here, hang on. I got one.
Okay, you're probably faster than me.
I'm going to go with 6 cents a word on a 90,000 word manuscript.
Yeah, Ken makes a good point. Stephen King's editor probably only has one client. That's probably true.
That's $5,400.
Yeah.
It's pretty good. But you got to think about it. what it would cost somebody to get me to like do an actual edit of their book, assuming I was capable of doing that, it would be a lot because time is money. And when
Right.
you're asking somebody to put that kind of time and editing somebody else's work is really hard.
Yeah, a 9,000-word manuscript for some of my quickest clients, that could take me under a week to do 2 passes. For some really clean writing, it would take me under a week. But for a newer writer, that could take me a month easily.
Yeah.
Right.
How much do you make in a month?
Yeah.
You're hiring a professional for a month of their time. And that could be for 1 pass. That's just the first pass. And I send it to my client. They go through the changes, and then they send it back, and then I read through it again. So for 2 passes, that could add up to 5 or 6 weeks of time.
Yeah. And what most people's day job, what would they get paid in an entire month?
Right.
You know,
Right.
or what would childcare cost for an entire month? You know, that's going to add up. Ken also says that he bets that George R.R. Martin's editor is homeless.
Waiting on that.
8 years later, we'll edit for food and things like that. So, so before we get to the editor, there's some things we're talking about doing, and what have we covered so far? First, we have to celebrate, either decide whether you're going to put it aside or dive right back into it. Reading it aloud, using devices to read it aloud to you. There's software. I like Pro Writing Aid. Some people use Grammarly.
It's pretty good. I like that one.
They have lots of limitations, but I've always treated those, and Lauren, you can tell me if you think this is a good idea or not, but I've always treated those as getting it ready for the editor.
Right.
And trying to, so they can focus on the more important stuff and hopefully not charge you as much if they charge by time. Some editors charge different ways, I guess, right?
I just think it's a good policy to just do as much as you can do, just so that they can, because I think that will allow the editors to do kind of a deeper dive on it if they're not distracted by the surface problems that you could have fixed yourself if you'd just taken the time.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. If they're not hung up on fixing all the grammar so that they can understand what's being said, that they can focus on making the writing more concise or switching words or phrases out to make the writing more powerful, more moving, interesting. That's what you really want your editor to do, is to be like a craftsman with you. Well, some authors. Other authors don't. Other authors really just want to copy edit. And by that, I mean, please just fix my grammar, make sure there's no mistakes, but my words are written the way I want them written, in my voice, and this is where I've kind of landed, and I just need you to fix any little mistakes that are left.
Right.
To copy edit, and that's before the proofread.
And so what are the different types of edits?
Developmental, or structural, those are kind of two names. But developmental, that'll be looking at the story as a whole. That'll be looking at the character development, pacing, voice, the narrative voice, and the character voices. That'll be looking at theme development. For me, it's also looking at the timeline to make sure that the timeline makes sense, and that things are happening in the order that they're supposed to be happening. And if your scene starts in the morning, that the sun is up in the description and not shadows, or if the scene's supposed to be at night, that you will have trouble seeing things. So things like that, continuity. I look for that in the developmental edit. After that's the line edit, and that's fixing that can still be some of the same things like character voice, pacing, but that can be making the paragraphs more concise. That can be saying this scene has a whole lot of dialogue, but I'm not visualizing anything because there's not any description here. Or vice versa. There's a lot of description, but there's not a lot of action. It's getting too slow. So that I might try to offer suggestions and fix stuff in the line edit there too. I guess kind of like developmental line kind of bleeding into each other, but I'll look at those sorts of things in a line edit. Copy edit is the grammar and the spelling.
Right. And that's what some people, they want to do, the minimum viable product and just correct my spelling and hit publish.
That's true. And if you're someone like Nicole and your writing is beautiful and it doesn't really need help as far as a line edit or developmental edit, just need the things fixed, then as an editor, that's my job. Like, just
and that's a client that is the best one to have, right?
he's great.
Yeah.
They're great.
Yeah. Good
I have a lot
stuff.
of fantastic clients. But those are two of my favorites.
Yeah.
So all right, so let's say you've hit the end, you've run your spell check and you're perfected and all the other things, you've got it polished, you got it cleaned up as much as you can before you send it to the editor for them to really put the shine on it. What do you do while the editor has it? Do you dive into something new? You kick back and wait for the corrections to come back to you? What's the move then?
So I think, if you feel definitely write another book. But so getting more into the nuance of it, if you are feeling compelled to write the next book, then go at it, as quickly as you can, whether that's outlining or doing it. If you're kind of hating life and like everything you write is making you want to die a little bit because it's so much work, then write something else. And that's my idea is go write a short story, go write in some other genre that you've been playing around with, and then come back to it. But for me, since I want to do it this full time and retire, hopefully sooner rather than later. For me, so we're getting out of creative and into more of kind of the business management stuff. And so I write I don't write anything I don't enjoy, because if I'm going to write stuff that I hate doing, then I might as well just keep my day job. I mean, what's the point? So I always write stuff that I enjoy regardless of genre, but like right now I always write what makes me money first. And I have a certain amount of stuff I have to get done on that each day. And then, so for me, I can usually do that in the morning, and then I'll go do stuff with the family, work out, and I'll come back in the afternoon. And then my afternoon writing session will be on my personal project, or maybe a secondary collaboration, because I have like 9 of them lined up. But, and so I'll do that break kind of thing there, right until, so if I was feeling compelled to write the next book in that series, then I would do that, obviously, because that's a moneymaker. But I'm not afraid to go write a Western that I started 10 years ago and write a couple thousand words in it and then jump back to whatever.
I think Ken's telling me to write another book.
Yeah, what he said, like how many times? Write the next book. Does he have one in mind in particular? Okay.
But no, that's kind of where I always fall with that. Whenever I've got one out with an editor, what I'll do is I'll start doing what I call the pre-work, which is like, character studies and that kind of thing. If it's a new project, if it's a sequel project, I'll start working on the plot, but I don't really dive into the manuscript too much until I'm done with the corrections on the last one. Because it's like, I've only got so much headspace to develop, to devote to any one project. And I'm not one of these people that can bounce between books a lot.
Yeah.
Hi, Anthony DeMarco says, I always run 2 or 3 projects at a time. Never have writer's block. I heard this from a couple of people at the conference.
I think Rick Partlow does the same thing.
Yeah, Asimov was famous for that. He'd always have multiple projects going, just so if he stalled on something, he'd always have something else to go to.
You keep that momentum up. Keep it fresh.
That's a whole other topic.
Yeah, we can get into those things for sure. All right. Let's see. We got any questions in the live chat? Write one, edit another. I've done that too, where I'm editing one, and I've actually done that during the revision, where like I'm going back and doing my personal revision, but like I'm outlining the next book. So revising one and outlining the next one, that works really well sometimes because you're kind of connected to both. Rick's writing at 3 a.m. now, so we're the 3 a.m. team
now. Well, that's
3 at a time. I think 3
when you
a.m.
write 30,000 words a day.
Yeah. Well, I talked to Rick, and so I'm just going to spill his secret because I'm sure he wants me to. But we were talking one time, and he says he basically writes 2,000 on one and then 2,000 on the next. So he likes to.
That makes perfect sense.
Yeah. So you get to the point where 2,000 sometimes just feels like all you can do on that project. Well, that doesn't mean you can't do another one.
Shift gears and yeah.
I like to compare that to, I mean, you could watch 2 movies in a day and have no problem with keeping track of them in your head. So why can't you write 2 stories? And actually you have more control over that. So that's why I've always looked at that. Just write another one.
JR says, sometimes I suffer from plumber's block. Does that count?
That always counts. That always counts.
X-lax.
Bill Frisbee says, what time frames do you have? When do you write the end and when do you hit publish after that?
That depends on the editing process. How long?
And then
does
depends
it
on the author.
Yeah, I mean, if there's a ton of corrections, you don't want to hit publish until, but then again, if you set up like a pre-order and that kind of thing, then that could affect it. I mean, that's kind of one of those depends type situations. If it's totally like I can just publish when I want to publish,
Mhm.
I absolutely am going to make sure that it's been through the editing process and it's as good as I can make it before I hit publish. That's my personal preference.
If you're not on a hard schedule and you have the patience for, I think it's good, maybe good to let something sit a little bit extra, just to kind of let it percolate, age it a little bit before you throw it out there, or maybe
Nothing wrong with that.
get a jump on the next one in case you wind up needing to do a rapid release.
Rick Partlow says, I usually take a week between the end and hitting publish.
Yeah, that's
Authors who take about 24 hours.
Yeah.
And we know other authors who have a whole book launching
Oh yeah.
strategy that they've got planned out,
Like
2 months in advance, stages leading up to the weeks. James Hunter was at Superstars Writing Conference, and he gave a 3-part series on how to hack Amazon. It was excellent. I hope to have him on the writer's journey to explain it all to us, because I need to hear it all over again, and I want you guys to hear it too. It was so good.
Is that his launch strategy and promotional strategy that he's talking about, like timing and all those things, or?
It's a 2-month tactical plan that he implements, starting from pre-orders and promotions, and when to tell his list that the book is coming out, when not to tell his list that the book is coming out, social media, book.
I feel like it takes a lot of discipline in planning.
He's got a whole system in place, and then he just reuses it again and again for each book. And they publish multiple books a month, I believe. They're publishing quite frequently, but they just keep using that plan, and they tweak it. They try new things, to see what works best for them.
And who is that? Hunter?
James Hunter. He is.
I'm curious.
A member.
There we go. I'm gonna look him up.
He published, I think, the Viridian's Gate series. James Hunter and his wife Jeanette Stroud. Their company, Shadow Alley Press. Fantastic.
Awesome.
He agreed to come on the show, so we'll get him on and have him explain.
Yeah.
Sounds like a good one.
Good times. Always something to learn. All right. Well, what do you think? You think we're done, or we're gonna keep going? Or
Oh,
what?
I don't know. I think we bored.
And I got the smooth outro, like the
Lauren's probably
Josh show.
babysitting.
Yeah. Well, Rick, Chuck and I wanted to come on by ourselves, but Josh wouldn't let us. He said
He did. He
we
wouldn't.
needed somebody to help
we needed
us.
an adult in the room.
Needed
Not
somebody
to
to
make
save.
my way on. I was like, Joshy, what are you guys are talking about tonight? And he said,
Yeah. I want to play.
I'd like to talk. Well, no, I miss you guys so much. I didn't get to do it last week, and then.
And now we're back.
And now we're back.
We should do a Keystroke meme every day, and we could
You
always.
class up the scene a lot. You need to come on more often.
Thanks.
Awesome. Well, it sounds good. What do we got going on Thursday? And then
Thursday, Larry Brooks. He's going to come on and talk to us about. Well, actually, it'll be kind of like part 2 to this night.
right.
He's going to come on and talk to us about plot revision. Hopefully, plot revision before you start writing your draft, but after is fine too. After works as well.
Awesome. And that's the
That's
guy
good.
that wrote the book we just pushed, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So check that out.
Push it crazy. All right. Well, I guess that's about wraps it up for tonight. So I guess we'll check back in. Make sure to come in Thursday for the writer's journey, and next Monday when we're talking about some reading, writing, and everything in between. See y'all later.
Later, guys.